Hello, everyone. Welcome to my project presentation for Global Business Management or Management 541. My name is Daniel Murillo, and the company I chose to go with is called Small Homes for Large Homelessness. It's actually going to be a nonprofit company, so it might be a little bit different in terms of the information that was being given throughout the course. So this is something that I had always just been thinking about in the past, never really thought about actually making a presentation on it, but here we are, and I guess I'll get started right now. So this is just the table of contents and just a little bit of general background of the company. We are a nonprofit company set on building small homes for the homeless. We will focus on building in areas around the world with the highest amount of homelessness, which we will then build small homes, roughly 100 square feet. So they're going to be really small homes, and they'll cost roughly $8,000 to build, which is based off of a little bit of research I've done on people who have actually been doing this before. So they will have the essentials of a small bed, storage, a toilet, room for a small fridge, small electric stove, and one sink. And there will be a separate common area for showers for the village of the small homes, which I'll continue getting into. So what makes this company a little bit different is not every home is necessarily going to be donated. So the first 6 months of living there are going to be free for these tenants. However, after that, they will be charged rent. Very low, of course, but just enough to need a sense of income. I was thinking, depending on where the company is or where we're building them, maybe like $100 a month equivalent of like US dollars. So the home will be bunched together in small villages of roughly 25 houses. So 20 of these houses are going to be rented out for prices that will vary, of course, depending on what country that village is in. So for those incapable of working anymore, they will get free rents. So because there's plenty of homeless out there who are much older, disabled, who just can't work anymore. So at least to give them that sense of shelter, that home for them, that's one thing that we do want to do. But the money from the rent from those who are still able to work, they'll go to building new homes in other areas of the country, along with hopeful donations and government aid to help us gain the capital we need to start building these. So the reason I'm doing the whole rent thing is because this will give incentive for the capable homeless to hopefully find a job which will only benefit their lives at that point. So we don't want them to just live in these homes and not really feel the need to do anything else. We want them to have the motivation to go out, get a job, and hopefully this will help aid them in their lives, and they'll be able to stay in these small homes, or if they're able to, get a good enough job, then they could move on to a bigger and better home, which will just help with the homeless crisis. And we feel that it would make a big difference in terms of the homeless population right now. So this is a little bit of an idea of what you might expect one to look like. As you can see here, that's the bed. That's, I believe, here's the little kitchen, little sink. I believe the toilet is in there, and then some more storage back there as well. And very small, so putting roughly 25 of these together won't take up too much space, so we won't need to necessarily buy that much land. So the one country that I started looking at most was India. So just a little bit of reason why I was looking at India is the fastest growing economy in the world at the moment. With a population of 1.3 billion, they make up a sixth of the world's population. And with 1.8 million of those people being homeless. So with India being a top 3 rapidly growing economy, it helps us with our efforts in incentivizing the homeless to be able to get a job and help better their lives. So currently the growth index for India is at a very high 7%. They also have an FDI attractiveness of 1.5, which indicates to us that investors are rapidly coming to India, which means that more jobs are going to be open, which further aids what we're trying to do as a company. So as I mentioned, with the better company, it will allow for more job opportunities, and having to pay rent will work well with people living there, since they will still want to keep having a safe shelter for themselves. And continuing on, education in India is on its way toward improving due to major increases in government funding in rural areas. It is not uncommon to find that child labor is a primary reason children are not in school. This is because the need of children in the farms and family to work to provide a living for families below the poverty line. So with India wanting to expand its schooling in rural areas, us building homes in those areas for homeless families will not only encourage the parents to obtain jobs needed to support their family further, but will also give the children more opportunities for education. So, a little bit of the political risk of going into India, and it mainly only has one that could affect our company, and that is that it comes in the form of slowed government decisions due to recent political instability. So, if this does become a larger problem, government aid is going to be a little bit more difficult to obtain, and that is one thing that we rely heavily on. Of course, since we are a nonprofit, we are going to rely solely on donations and, of course, as I mentioned, the government aid. So if there's turmoil in the government, it's going to be pretty difficult for us to get that capital we need to continue building these homes. So a little bit of the economic risk. So the economy for India is actually based quite a lot on oil and monsoon. So if oil is not doing well, then you can expect the economy will not be doing well as well. But at the moment, oil has been reasonably okay, and monsoons this year has been pretty good. So in the near term, there is no macro shock expected that will affect the economy. So we feel that right now is a good time to get into India and begin building the homes. So for legal risk, the main law for us to abide by is the housing law, which allows for tenants to get charged a fixed fee that cannot go up. But of course, for our efforts, we have no intention of raising rent. It will be a consistent rent in order for tenants to be incentivized to gain employment in order to pay it. So other than housing laws, our company is confident that any other legal aspects will not play a negative role in our mission, mainly because we're being pretty much straightforward in what we're doing. We're building small homes and renting them out to people. There's not too much going into that, and we don't necessarily have to deal with much of labor laws either, since these are volunteer workers. So looking into the housing laws into deeper detail will be probably the biggest aspect for us. So when we take a look at India and their cultural risks, so one thing that needs to be taken into account is the fact that India is fond of long-term relationships and is very prevalent in their culture. So a quote I got here from one of my sources is, "A thorough understanding of the underlying values and beliefs of the local culture and how they can affect the workplace is crucial to the success of your business. Having local help can really make a difference to the success of your venture." So India is a country in which many different religious views or different religious views live amongst each other. So there are roughly over 1,700 different languages in India, with 122 of those being major languages, Hindi and English being the most common. So I'm gonna go a little bit into why these are risks for us. So in order to avoid conflict, we need to keep all religious views away from the project. India's culture revolves much around religion, and you can see from the chart there that Hindu is actually the #1 religion in India. So therefore, we must abide our business method by their main beliefs. And India is actually recently known to have a political party known as the Bharatiya Janata Party. I believe I might have pronounced that wrong, but they aim to slow the spread of Christianity. And in the past, they have geared violence toward anyone Christian. We have actually seen in India that some people have been murdered. Some of their homes have been burned down. So that's a little bit of a red flag for us, especially if we are coming from a Christian background, and especially some of the volunteers and whatnot. But as I mentioned, there's no need for us to necessarily display that when we're out there. We're just there to build the homes, try to help out the people, and hopefully that shouldn't really hinder our operations there. But of course, while we're there, we're going to try to abide by Hinduism and everything they believe in. We don't want to, offend anyone's religions, because that will just make it much more difficult for us to be able to do what we want to do out there. Another one is that India's social structure is very different from any other countries in the world. So they run on a system known as I believe it's the caste or the caste, which divides people by their careers. We plan to aim our efforts to the citizens on the lower end, which is mainly, for example, people like the street cleaners or just the menial tasks, mainly just the bottom of the bottom right there. So we plan to aim our efforts towards them because they're the ones who are most likely going to be in that poverty line, the ones who are in need of those homes. And we also plan to be prepared to build 200 square foot homes to accommodate families, since India is such a family oriented area. But of course, that's going to come with more capital that's needed to be raised. So that could come as a bit of a risk on how much we can actually build in terms of the number of houses in these areas. So the strategy we're going to use For our company is localization. We feel that's the one we could benefit best from. We understand that some countries and communities may need houses built in a certain way. This can range from communities with large amounts of homeless families, which will need a slightly larger home, compared to areas where single persons are homeless and can live in a smaller home, like the 100 square foot ones we were talking about. But like I said, the ones for families may need to be upgraded to 200 square feet, which is going to take a little bit more of capital needed in order to do so. And of course, certain geographic areas have certain weather conditions, some being extremely hot, some being extremely cold. So with those, we're gonna have to build with the material needed in order to make those houses best suitable for the geographic area they are in. So let's move on. We also have to build according to local laws and governances. Costs will be definitely higher in the localization strategy because there is a lot more customizations, but in these efforts, we really need to build in a customizable aspect because, as I mentioned, there's different aspects in every country that we're gonna have to take into account, and we can pretty much guarantee that not every home is gonna be the same in every single country. So localization is going to be the most important aspect for us in terms of our strategy because we really want to build these homes in a way where it's actually benefiting the people to the utmost extent, especially based off of where they live. So continuing on. Where and why? So our homes are going to be built directly in the area that we are operating in. They're not going to be built in, let's say, the US and then shipped all the way over to, let's say, India. The reason is because we want them to be, there's going to be plumbing and whatnot. So we're going to have that, it's going to be underground as well. So we're going to need to work with the ground that we're building on. And we are going to build based on, like as I mentioned, if there's larger families that need specific size homes with specific layouts. You could actually see right here on your right, that's pretty much what a layout for a 200 square foot home will be. Gives you a little bit more room to work with, but we feel that'll definitely be beneficial for a small family. And as I mentioned, the rent will go straight to our account, which funds the building of these homes. And if enough funds are raised, we would also like to hire local homeless in those areas to help build the homes. We feel that'll be a great addition to what we're trying to do. So those homeless who are planning on living in these homes will also get the opportunity to help build them themselves and maybe make a little bit of money while they are doing so. So continue on as the where and why. The mission will be successful because homeless are rampant throughout the world. There are no countries in the world that cannot benefit from this. In fact, approximately 1.6 billion people in the world have inadequate shelter, which is a pretty good fraction of our entire population globally. So with this being a huge crisis, there are many people aware of it. So pretty much everyone knows that homelessness is it's a big deal around the world, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to gain donations since it is a very well-known crisis. So many governments are also aware of this in every country, and that can make assistance from them more viable. So the entry mode we plan to use. So for our company, we find that a wholly owned subsidiary is the method that we will use that will be most useful to us. The reason being is that we have every intention of doing the necessary work and research to survive and thrive on our own as a company. We highly considered a joint venture in order to minimize the amount of work and capital needed to get started. But if we were to get a joint venture with a company that is doing something very similar to us, that is going to require more donations, and that's gonna possibly take away from each other's. So we feel that if we are able to just do this on our own, that is going to leave us with complete control on how we want to do it, especially the whole rent aspect. I haven't really seen any other companies who have done this, and I do believe that's something that could be useful. So we would like to just keep that going and without having to worry about what another company might feel about that. So we will definitely go with the wholly owned subsidiary. So for the labor market, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit and a volunteer-based operation, so we actually don't have very much to look at in terms of the labor market. The only aspect of labor we will look at will come in certain scenarios, as I mentioned, where we raise enough capital to hire local homeless to build the homes. And they will most likely get paid the minimum wage of that specific country we are operating in. And with India being our first place of operations, the minimum for labor would be $148 a month, which is roughly a pretty low number. So if we are able to gain the donations and government aid that we have mentioned, then we would definitely like to be able to offer that to local homeless around the area to help build these homes and it'll definitely get started on them being able to better their lives. So for the human resources approach, as I mentioned again, since we are nonprofit, we won't necessarily be giving much of a wage or benefits package, but they will be determined based off of the funds that we are able to generate through donations and government aid. So we have our own set of people within the company who work on a volunteer type basis. However, as I mentioned, of course, if we are able to generate a sufficient amount of capital, we would like to hire local citizens and help aid the community. But continuing on with this, for the actual workers in the company, if we begin spreading quicker than we anticipated, it may call for us to begin hiring personnel to help keep the operation smooth, since we are running on a global basis. So when it comes to compensating the workers that we would have if we are able to grow the business to a specific level where we're going to need full-time workers, then we would compensate based on the amount of work one is given. For example, we would most likely hire someone to specifically oversee a single country in which we are expanding in. So if a worker is overseeing all operations in India, in which we may have, maybe 30 villages being built versus another country such as Malta, in which there are maybe 3 villages at most, then compensation is going to be significantly different. We will compensate based on the amount of work and responsibility given to one worker. But of course, at the moment, it is difficult to determine benefit packages and whatnot until we are able to see the actual magnitude of the company growth. So we can't necessarily say that we could offer these benefits and whatnot because we're not at that level yet. At the moment, we're just focused on donations, government aid, and volunteer work. But of course, we are running on a global basis. So if that does require a lot of effort, a lot of work, and in which we may have to hire full-time personnel because that will be a long-term project right there globally. And so just to kind of summarize it, overall, our company is a nonprofit with the hopes of aiding the homeless crisis. We are doing so in an unorthodox way by charging rent, but we see the positives in it in the long run. We plan to start in India, which is one of the biggest homeless populations. We will have volunteers, but we'll pay local homeless to help build based off of the capital we gain from the donations and aid. We want to cover as many areas in the world as possible because, as I mentioned, every single area in the world has a homeless population to some extent. So if the company grows substantially, we will make the full-time employees a possibility in the company. And we do feel it'll work because, as I mentioned, there's homeless everywhere in the world. It is a very well-known crisis in which generating capital shouldn't be too difficult to do since so many people are aware of it. So many people already donate to causes like this. And with our approach of charging rent, after 6 months, it can help with the homeless problem by not only providing housing, but also encouraging people to obtain employment because we want to give them the best experience possible when staying in those homes. We want them to realize that this is not something they necessarily want to lose and something that they want to, gain even better from in the future. So with that rent will come buildings and new villages around the world and possibly helping with gaining capital for our full-time personnel. And that is pretty much the end. Here are just a few of my references, and that pretty much sums it up. Thank you all for viewing my presentation. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I look forward to looking at your guys' projects as well. Thank you.